Well, I want to welcome everybody in our viewership. We were fortunate enough to have for the February Eye on Piscataway is our Congressman Frank Pallone is stopping by from his busy schedule to talk of a few things that are going on in Washington. And there's always something going on in Washington, but more importantly is some of the things that really affect the households of the congressional district in Piscataway Township and surrounding communities in Middlesex County and Monmouth County. So, Congressman, there was three items that we were speaking about before we were going on the air, and one of them was regarding the transparency in hospital prices. Now, I know everybody probably in the viewership area can understand that there's an issue with the pricing, because if you ever get a hospital bill and or what your insurance carrier pays, you just, it's very hard to understand in layperson's terms. Unless you're physically do that day to day in hospital administration, you might have a working knowledge of how pricing happens. But for lay people out there, it's just mind-boggling when they see a piece of paper that, you know, tens of thousands of dollars, and then there's these discounts on this and that, and you know, and then people just want to know what the bottom line number is going to be, what they have to pay out of pocket, and it gets very confusing, and they don't understand if they go into a hospital or drug pricing or everything. It's just, it's probably the most confusing thing that people can think of. So do you want to talk a little bit about the bill that you sponsored in regards to this, and why you believe there needs to be more transparency and more accountability for industry in that fact for the general public?
Well, absolutely. And thank you, Mayor, for having me on the show and for all you do as the mayor of Piscataway. I've never seen, I know you don't want me to talk about this, but your recreational facility there is unbelievable, the community center. And we were just at I guess we were at the senior center a couple of weeks ago for the Martin Luther King commemoration. You just have so many
that was very well attended. We had a couple hundred people there for that event. And I want to thank you for taking time out of your schedule to stop by for that.
No, absolutely. I always enjoy it. But look, for years, I've been getting people coming to the office and complaining to me about the inability to navigate, you know, how much you're being charged at a hospital. And in theory, of course, you want competition, right? In other words, I mean, a lot of people say, oh, Congressman, how are we going to have competition? How can I actually shop around and decide what hospital to go to or what you know, usually that decision is based on which doctor you choose, right? But the bottom line is that in theory, the hospitals have to provide pricing information, right? If you literally call them up and say, I want my bill and I want it broken down, they have to provide it to you. But it's hard for people to get that information. And even when they get it, to actually figure out what it says, right? So a few years ago, we actually, it wasn't me, but somebody did a little survey and went to 3 hospitals in the congressional district to see how much they were charging for different items. And it was just ridiculous, right? Like, for example, there was an ice bag, if you call it that, that one hospital was charging $200 for, and the other was only charging $5. And when we had a hearing on this issue, I had a member, somebody representing the American Hospital Association, this is in Washington, that said, oh, Congressman, why are you bringing that up? You know, those numbers don't mean anything. We figure out what the overall bill is, and then we just assign those numbers. They're not actually based on what it costs us, right? And I said, that's ridiculous, right? So the idea is to, you know, have some standardized way on it, you know, go on the internet that you can see what the actual charges are, and it has to be in a clear form so you know what, you know, they're saying they're charging for. And that's what this bill is all about. And it's designed to, you know, not only to provide information, but also theoretically to have some competition. Now, maybe you know, you're not as an individual going to decide what hospital to go to based on the price, but the fact that it's that somebody can comparison shop, I think, helps bring costs down and give a true understanding of what's happening. But the bill also deals with insurance companies too, Mayor. So it says that they have to provide information too about, you know, how much they're paying for different things and what they're charging and what their in-network rates are versus their out-of-network rates. So there's a lot of transparency with regard to insurance companies too, and also with regard to PBMs, which are those pharmaceutical managers that operate between the pharmaceutical companies and the consumers. So it isn't just hospitals, but I do think it's important, and I appreciate bringing it up. It's bipartisan. It was reported out of the committee and passed the House on suspension, meaning overwhelmingly, and so now we're trying to get it done in the Senate as well.
Well, I think it's interesting for a lot of parents and seniors, but more importantly, young adults now that may be off mom and dad's policy to really shop around. And as I tell my own adult children now, 2 of them now are off our policy, that just because the doctor's office says, oh, such and such is in network, doesn't mean it actually, the people in network, because if you're going to have a procedure done, the anesthesiologist, the person performing it may be in network, but the anesthesiologist might, or the radiologist might not be, even though they're attached to the doctor's office. So I try to explain to them, you always need to get everything in writing saying that its cost is going to be covered, because if you don't get it in writing via email or a hard copy, then you're on the hook for out-of-pocket, out-of-network costs. And that's something, people just think, oh, well, they're tied in with that doctor's office and they're doing the procedure. You just assume that everything's in network because you went to a doctor that was in network.
And it's just not often the case. In fact, even, people go to an emergency room because they know that their hospital is in network. And so they go to the emergency room. And then they'll find out later that even the emergency room doctors are not in network, even though the hospital is in network that they're going to where they're working. So, but I have to say, this kind of gets also, Mayor, to a larger issue. We really have to do something so that our healthcare system isn't so complicated and so difficult to navigate access, because, otherwise people are going to lose faith in the system. They're not going to go for, to do things in advance so they don't get sick. And I do worry that over the years, the ability to navigate and have access is becoming so complicated for the average person. And, this is an effort to try to make things easier for people to understand, but we've got to do that in so many different ways, because otherwise the system's going to fail us,
Well, it was interesting. You and I were talking a little bit about an article that was in one of the local national newspapers about how in the southern part of the United States now, that where there was political pushback from those elected officials about joining Obamacare and or other changes that were taking place over the last 15 years. And now they're taking a second look at it, because now their primary care physician facilities, their local rural hospitals or everything, are now in financial straits because they don't have a revenue stream coming in to treat folks that may necessarily not need to go to an emergency room.
Right. In other words, when we did Obamacare, the Affordable Care Act, we basically expanded coverage for Medicaid to people a little higher income, right? Because the Medicaid level, where you were eligible for Medicaid, which is the combination of state and federal program that helps people who are lower income, was so low that a lot of people couldn't afford to buy insurance, even Obamacare. But at the same time weren't eligible for Medicaid, which didn't cost them anything or very little. And so we expanded it to a little higher income, so those people would be captured who maybe couldn't afford to buy insurance, right? But the states had to vote to do that, and a lot of the southern or western states, with Republican governors or legislatures, didn't do it for ideological reasons, because they didn't think that the government should be involved in healthcare. But it was such a bargain that gradually what we're doing, bargains for the state. But what's happening now is because a lot of these rural hospitals in the South or the West aren't getting the funding that would come from getting Medicaid. And remember, they can't not accept a patient. If someone goes to an emergency room in rural Mississippi, they have to take them. And then the person can't pay, so they don't get any revenue to help pay for that person's care. And so now a lot of them are considering expanding Medicaid and taking advantage of the federal program so that they have a source of revenue, which makes sense, right? We want people to go and get a doctor so they don't have to go to the emergency room, because in the long run, not only does it make them healthier and less prone to disabilities or dying, God forbid, but also, it's preventative, because if you can see a doctor early and solve the problem, then it doesn't cost much. If you get sick and you get hospitalized, it may cost thousands and thousands of dollars, either to you, or if you can't pay, then to the government.
Well, I know in Piscataway Township over the last month, I was at 2 ribbon cuttings, one for pediatric urgent care facility and another one for an urgent care facility, is that now the private sector is seeing a niche market now. Instead of having to go to the emergency room, that there's maybe lesser emergencies that you can go to these other urgent care
Right.
facilities where they can get prompt medical treatment that's in network with the insurance that they may have, and be a lesser cost value than as if they just went to their emergency room, because sometimes now it's very hard to get an appointment with a primary care physician because there's even a shortage of that.
There absolutely is. But again, I know that you and I are talking about practically what you do now, and obviously that's important. But I mean, we really do have to somehow make the system better and less complicated, because otherwise people are going to not have access, and quality of care is going to suffer. So this is all part of that. It really is.
Well, before we move on to a couple of different subjects, but I want to touch on one thing that's sort of along the lines of what we were speaking about. I know the president a while back had signed into law about drug prices for Medicare
Yes.
patients getting out of the country, generic drug pricing, where they can negotiate for generic drugs. I mean, we should be feeling the effects of that, I would think, soon.
No, in fact, it was just, I think it was either yesterday or maybe it's next week that the federal government announced that they're moving forward with the 10 drugs that they've chosen under the bill that, and again, something that I sponsored, that requires the federal government to negotiate prices under Medicare, right?
Yep.
They start with 10 drugs, and they're the 10 drugs that have biggest problem in terms of costs, and they're very commonly used. And those have been announced, and now they're starting the process of negotiating. But again, this is only under Medicare, right? And it's 10 drugs this year, and each year they're going to be more and more. And it's really significant, because it means that the price of these drugs will go down considerably, and the cost of the copays will go down. And this is what other countries do. The government negotiates a fair price. But I've actually introduced a bill, which we hope we will eventually get, that moves this into the private sector. In other words, that once that price is set, it would also be set for private sector insurance and Obamacare. It wouldn't just be for Medicare. But at least we're starting with Medicare for seniors in negotiating these prices and bringing them down, because in many cases, seniors here are paying more, maybe 3-4 times as much as they would in other countries, in Western Europe or Japan or Australia. And it's just not fair, because, it really brings up the cost of the healthcare system and all the consequences from that.
And especially you may have a senior whose their sole income may be Social Security.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
And they're also kicking in that on an annual basis, that what you have to pay out of pocket couldn't be more than $2,000, which may seem like a lot, but there are a lot of seniors now paying $5,000 or $6,000 a year.
Yeah. Well, all I know is that I have a couple extended family members now. They're very happy that the president signed in law, because now the cost of insulin has gone down, which is a huge deal if you're somebody who has to take insulin.
Right, capped at $35 a month under Medicare. But once again, we'd like to expand that. And there's legislation in our committee that would expand that $35 cap on insulin to the rest, private insurance and the rest of the public as well. But I have to say that, there are people that are saying that once these prices are set under Medicare, or once the price is set for insulin under Medicare, which is what the law says now, that it's going to be hard for those things to be sold for a lot more. Because in other words, think about it. If a drug like Humira, which is one of the 10, is if the price is set under Medicare, isn't the insurance company going to come back and say, well, I'm not paying more than that. Why should I pay more than that? Yeah. Or in the case of insulin, what's happening is a lot of the companies that sell insulin now are saying we're going to sell it to the public in general at no more than $35 a month, because we made that under Medicare. So they're saying, well, the private sector shouldn't charge more than $35 a month for anybody else either. So it's having kind of a ripple effect beyond Medicare already.
Well, that's good. And that wouldn't have happened unless the president signed into legislation that I know that you were involved in, and I want to thank you for that. We're going to take a quick break and go around town for some other video things, and then we're going to come back and speak with the congressman about food safety for infants and toddlers, and also the end of illegal robocalls. Well, we're on a nice clear day here for a ribbon cutting ceremony of a new small business opening up here at American Family Care out here on Stelton Road next to the McDonald's and Rob DeLeo's property there, good owner, which is good. I have Councilman Dennis Espinoza with me and the owners. And then would you like to say a few words to the folks out here before we make the official ribbon cutting?
Yes, hi, welcome everybody here. We are excited to have our urgent care open up here in Stelton Road. And in Piscataway, we have a really good staff out here. We have AFC Urgent Care, which is nationwide urgent care, and we do the best to provide the care that you guys need. We have our staff and the medical director out here. So welcome, and I hope to serve the community.
Please raise your right hand, Jessica. I, Jessica Cortez.
I, Jessica Cortez.
Do solemnly swear.
Do solemnly swear.
I, James Stovikin.
Do solemnly swear.
Do solemnly swear.
I, Nicholas Korsha.
Do solemnly swear.
Do solemnly swear.
That I will support the Constitution.
That I will support the Constitution.
Of the United States.
Of the United States.
And the Constitution.
And the Constitution.
Of the State of New Jersey.
Of the State of New Jersey.
That I will bear true faith.
That I'll bear true faith.
And allegiance to the same.
And allegiance to the same.
And to the governments established.
And to the governments established.
In the United States.
In the United States.
And in the State of New Jersey.
And in the State of New Jersey.
On the authority of the people.
On the authority of the people.
That I will faithfully.
That I will faithfully.
Impartially.
Impartially.
And justly.
And justly.
Perform all the duties. Perform all the duties.
Perform all the duties.
Of office of probationary police officer.
Of office of probationary police officer.
According to the best of my ability.
According to the best of my ability.
So help me God.
So help me God.
Well, congratulations.
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 Patrolwoman Jessica Cortez came to us from Chatham PD, where she was employed there since June of 2022. She's a resident of East Brunswick, bilingual in Spanish, and an avid soccer player. She's currently assigned to our field training program on the afternoon shift. Patrolman James Stovikin is a resident of South River. He comes to us from Camden County Police Academy, where he was an alternate route candidate. He's previously employed by Toms River PD as a SLE-01, which is a Special Officer 1, where he did bookings, things like that. He's an avid bowler, and he is also currently assigned to the field training program on the day shift. Patrolman Nicholas Korsha is a resident of Monroe. He graduated alongside of Patrolman James Stovikin. He's a graduate of Thomas Jefferson University, and he was an avid baseball player. He's currently assigned to our training division, and after this week, he'll go to our FTO program, where he'll be assigned to day shift. I want to welcome all three of you. I look forward to working with you in the future, and congratulations on your appointment here in Piscataway. I hope you have a great career.
here on 1060 Stelton Road for the ribbon cutting of the newest urgent care facility, a Pediatric care. And we're with here Jillian Stratton from the CEO of the company. Jillian, you want to say something?
Oh, well, thank
Before
you.
we cut the ribbon?
Well, thank you so much for having us. We look forward to meeting all the moms and dads in Piscataway and helping the little ones. We're newborns to 21, and we're open 7 days a week. Thank you, Brian.
So for those folks who are looking where 106 is, just think the old Friendly's ice cream store. So instead of coming in for an ice cream, you can now come in for urgent care here at the, if you have a child that has anything other than what really needs to go into an emergency room. So with that, let's cut the ribbon here and wish you the best of luck here in Piscataway Township.
Thank you.
There you go.
Go, Kinder!
We would like to thank Mayor Brian Waller to come out on this beautiful day to celebrate the 75th Republican Day for Bharat. And we cannot thank you enough, as you have been such a great friend to our community and such a great leader here at Piscataway. Thank you again, everybody. Please put your hands together.
On behalf of Senator Smith and our county commissioners and our town council members, and also Councilman Shaw, I want to thank everybody for coming out today on the 75th Republic Day, the founding of the Republic of India. This is, I know, a very, you're the largest, India's the largest democracy in the world. We may be the oldest, but we have something in common. We're, at one time, all of us were under the British rule. For the young children out here, listen to Grandma and Grandpa and your parents. You need to keep cognizant of the history of where you came from. It's because it's very important to never forget history. Because unfortunately, the bad aspects of history have a tendency of repeating itself. And we're seeing some of that go on around the world right now. But we want to make sure we accentuate the best part of history, and this is one of the best parts, is the founding of the Republic of India on the 75th anniversary. So give all a round of applause here.
Vande! Vande! Sahido! Sahido! God bless America! Himachal Yamuna Ganga Uchala Jaladhi Taranga Tava Shubha Name Jage Tava Shubha Ashish Mage.
Okay, we're at 200 Centennial Avenue, Suite 140, and the company that we're going to do the grand opening for, and I want to turn the mic over to Dylan. Dylan, explain your company here.
Hi, thanks. So Infinite Athletic Training is a physical medicine and rehabilitation company that's also partnered with community outreach, where we go into the community and we supply medical providers for the sidelines of sporting events to give athletes the proper health care that they need. And we also have the opportunity to bring them into the clinic and be able to rehab them once they are injured. So we kind of are a company that gets the best of both worlds between physical therapy and kind of like an emergency medicine type of deal. And we couldn't be happier to be opening up in Piscataway, New Jersey. I grew up in Middlesex County, so I'm excited to be able to serve the community. We don't just serve athletes, though. Dylan, I want to turn it over to you because we also talk about.
Sounds like a law firm, Dylan and Dylan.
Yeah.
Another population that we are serving are first responders and veterans. Part of my background is firefighting. So originally, before we had partnered up last year, Tactical Athletic Training was a company I was running on my own. And now we are combining the two under Infinite Athletic Training. And we're going to be serving athletes and our first responders and veterans to make sure that our hometown heroes get the care that they deserve so that they can return to duty wherever that may be.
Okay, we're back again with Congressman Pallone, was patient enough to stick around while we had some video going in around town. So I want to get to the other subject. Well, if you're young parents out there, you know when you go to the grocery store to buy formula or food for your toddler or your infant, you would think that if it's on the shelf, it must be safe. And you would be some rudimentary testing done on product safety for infants and child, and evidently that doesn't necessarily happen. So Congressman, explain to us why this has become an urgent issue out there. And I know over the last year there's been a lot of news stories nationally, whether it was a shortage of formula, safe formula, and a lot of parents are scrambling around the country to buy safe formula. It seems almost unfathomable in a country such as ours, where we pride ourselves on food product safety, that something like this would have to now be legislated down to the nitty-gritty by the word to make sure that industry takes care of that.
Well, well, first of all, thank you for asking about it, Mayor. But, it kind of, in a larger sense, I get mad sometimes because I have so many people that come up to me and say, oh, there's too much regulation by the government, right? Federal government is regulating everything too much. And then the same person will come back and express surprise over the fact that the FDA doesn't regulate something, right? So like if you continue to take the position that there should be less regulation, then don't assume that the government is regulating it. You know what I mean? So the fact of the matter is that the Food and Drug Administration doesn't regulate a lot of things, or doesn't have a lot of enforcement, because they don't have a lot of people necessarily doing the enforcement. And so this came to a head a couple of years ago because it really had gotten to the point where there was almost a monopoly with infant, with baby formula by one company that was, producing 80-90% of it, right? And the FDA went in and found out that the powdered milk was contaminated, and they shut the place down. And then they shut the place down, there was a shortage of baby formula. People went in and bought whatever they could at the supermarkets, and then there was none available. The president had to actually invoke, the Defense Production Act, the same thing he did during COVID, to try to bring in baby formula from overseas because it wasn't enough manufactured here, and it was a real crisis. Now that has lessened considerably, although some parents still tell me that when they try to find baby formula, depending on where they shop, that it's, sometimes they can't find it or it's out. So the problem is that the FDA doesn't necessarily regulate it, right? And there's a certain amount of regulation, but there isn't necessarily testing on a regular basis. And so in order to avoid the shortages, and also to make sure that it's not contaminated, this legislation requires testing, on
a regular basis.
Right. And that serves the purpose of not only making sure it's not contaminated, but also getting it in advance so you don't shut down and then there's a shortage again. It's pretty simple, but that's what it's about. But then there's the second aspect of the bill that deals with baby food, right? Not infant formula. I want to make a distinction. And there again, we've had a lot of instances of contaminated baby food, right? Just in December, there was a company that we found had lead in applesauce, right? And the FDA has also limited recall authority too.
And
So
if I may, Congressman, I'm reading some of the
yeah.
text here that the FDA's mandatory recall over infant and toddler foods that bear and contain contaminant products, adulterated, it would clarify the language over the powers of the FDA to do that. You would
Right.
think
In
that
other
they
words,
it would inherently would come to that because of food product safety. But I
no,
guess
they
it
don't
did. I
have.
guess it didn't.
It's not at all clear that they have the right to have a mandatory recall. And so most of the time they're asking the companies voluntarily to recall. And you know, if you get a bad actor,
Yeah.
which in the case of this applesauce, it was a bad actor. The evidence seems to point out that this was a company that was producing the applesauce, I think, in Ecuador, and was purposely using the lead because it was a way of, like, you know, producing more. I'm not exactly sure why. It was actually intentional. So you know, they're not going to do a recall unless you force it. So this bill would say that you know, the finished product, the applesauce or whatever, has to be tested before it goes to market for heavy metals and other contaminants, and clarifies that the FDA has the mandatory recall authority.
Yeah, and then also I'm reading part of this now. It requires within 24 hours that if it's not meeting the adequate nutrition or is it adulterated from what specs are, that they must notify the FDA.
Yeah, that's the other thing too, is a mandatory notice requirement, because they're not required to do that either. I mean, there's so many aspects of this, Mayor, that you know, people are so surprised that that's not already the law. But you know, there's been this effort, you know, kind of ideological effort, really, to say, well, we have too much regulation, we need less regulation, and not fund the agencies that do the enforcement of existing regulations. And as a consequence, a lot of things slip through the cracks that shouldn't.
I'm just finding it hard to believe that if there's a salmonella outbreak with baby formula, that there was really no oversight with Redbird. Because, like, if you go to a grocery store, every periodically you'll hear something, oh, there's been a salmonella outbreak or dealing with spinach or some, and then the agricultural department steps in and does what they have to do to regulate it. But I guess this was sort of a cosmic hole or something in regulations of infant formula and food products that existed for a number of years is now just finally being corrected because of some of your efforts.
I have to be honest, Mayor, you'd be surprised how a lot of the you know, consumer agencies that deal with products, consumer issues, agricultural products, you know, we've had to tighten the law to make sure that they have recall authority, because they oftentimes didn't. I mean, if you think about it, right, if you have a business, right, and you're making a product, right, whether it's a, you know, bicycle or whatever it is, right, you naturally, if you want to sell the product, and you're, you know, you're a good actor, you want to be in business for years and not just close the shop the next day, you're going to want to follow safety precautions and, you know, do what the FDA puts out in their guidance, or what Department of Agriculture, whatever. But you know, it's not always the case that they're good actors. There are fly-by-nights. There are things that come in from overseas, you know, where, you know, they just don't care. And that's why we've got to tighten a lot of these regulations and make sure that these federal agencies have the power to recall products that are unsafe or food that's contaminated. Because it's not always the case that you have a company that's, you know, looking to stay around and develop a good reputation. So they have to be forced.
One of the things, we're going to close out that segment there, and we're going to go to something that's near and dear, you know, since you on the Energy Commerce Committee, that comes what comes under your jurisdiction is having telecommunications. And I think everybody at one time can honestly say that they've had some annoying, like, robocalls to their house. And the Supreme Court, the rulings coming out of the last several years, sort of downgraded the existing FCC rules pertaining to robocalls and consumer protections and things like that. Tell us about the bill that you're working on to try to put it in writing to, I guess, reinforce again those restrictions pertaining to robocalls and artificial intelligence now. And I know a lot of people have seen in the news over the last year and change, because artificial intelligence is moving very quickly, probably quicker than government can keep up with regulating it. So why is that an important matter to the residents of Piscataway and the general Middlesex County and Monmouth County area?
Well, it's important because for two reasons. One is the number of robocalls and the fraudsters and the scams are increasing, right, every day. And it becomes very complex to deal with it and to figure out how legally to regulate it and make sure that people aren't scammed, right? And they're not getting annoying. Now, I have to be honest, I worry a lot more about the public health and safety aspects of this than I do the annoyance of it, right? A lot of people will call this office and say, well, you know, I'm getting all these annoying robocalls. And I'm not saying that's not important, but I think it's gotten to the point now where it actually becomes a public safety and public health hazard, because what a lot of people, particularly seniors, just don't answer the phone, right?
Yes.
And it may be that their doctor's calling them, or that you're putting out some sort of
alert, public safety
flood
alert
emergency or something that notify them. And then they're afraid to answer the phone or even look at a text message. And therefore, you know, they don't get the information that they need. I literally could spend the whole day with you on this, so let me try to be brief. A couple of years ago, the Supreme Court narrowed the definition of what's called auto dialing, right? And so as a result, there's not too much in what we would consider robocalls through automatic dialing that still are regulated. Most of it is not anymore. And that's why there's getting to be more and more of these calls. The other thing is that the regulations never included text messages, right? And now with the advent of AI, there's so many other ways to confuse people. And so let me just talk a little bit about it, and then we want to ask some more questions. So one of the things that we've done with this bill that's been introduced is to more broadly define what auto dialing is. And so, for example, it doesn't even necessarily have to be recorded. It could be somebody who's, you know, making a live call, right? It does include text messages, so that comes under the regulation. With regard to AI, it specifically says in the law, I mean, it's not passed yet, we're trying to get it passed, that you can't emulate, like, you know, what they'll do with artificial intelligence is try to have somebody call you who you think is a relative or that you're doing business with. And they can't do that anymore. In other words, they can't use AI to simulate somebody who you think is your friend or your relative, right? That's not allowed. Also, you know, we have the providers, you know, your phone system, whatever. A lot of them now provide a blocking service, but if you opt for that, they charge you. And this bill says they can't. They have to be able, if you say you want these calls blocked, they have to provide that service free of charge. So these are just some of the things that we're trying to do with the bill. I mean, there's a lot more.
Well, one of the things we always get calls over to our police department about these robo fraudsters that really target seniors. That's very concerning because, you know, if they say something's like health that you need to sign on, or
definitely,
you know what I mean. I mean, they're not necessarily. They get frightened and they may give out information that they shouldn't be giving out, and next thing you know, there's money out of their bank accounts, or somebody has their personal health.
People have lost their life savings. But a lot of it now has really gotten into the public health and public safety arena, where, you know, they're calling and, you know, saying they're a healthcare professional and they're, you know, trying to get you to do something, or they're pretending like they're some kind of public safety police or agency. I mean, it's really getting bad, and I've had a lot of those calls myself. The other thing you mentioned too, Mayor, was you talked about how as technology evolves, the scammers figure out how to get around the law or do things that that are illegal more effectively. And so that's another part of this is to set up a program whereby we are constantly monitoring through the federal agencies, the FTC or the FCC, what the next step might be technologically that has to be regulated or looked into, because there's going to be a constant effort to get around whatever we do in the legislation.
Well, that's a big item. Well, I want to thank Congressman Pallone for stopping by Ion Piscataway to talk about several important issues facing residents in the state of New Jersey and around the country. But I also want to thank both the Congressman and his staff for all the hard work that you've done working with the towns and cities in New Jersey and across the country. It's not just particularly for Piscataway Township, but you do take meetings with other mayors around the country as well as myself to talk about personally, whether it's mental health or programming and things that are affecting towns and the residents of those communities. And I want to thank all the hard work of your busy schedule. And I want to thank your wife, Sarah, for allowing you to spend time with us, because I know you still have to have a family life too. So
well, you have Paulette and your kids too.
Yeah. So I get that. So I appreciate that, and good luck down in Washington in the springtime.
All right, thanks a lot, Mayor. Thanks for all you do for your constituents in Piscataway. You're the best.
No.
Take care.
You're welcome. Well, I hope everybody enjoyed the February Ion Piscataway. There are a lot of informative information from Congressman Pallone and some of the exciting things that transpired throughout our community in the month of January and early February. So with that, we're going to see you back in March for the month of St. Patrick's Day. I know for those of Irish descent. So we look forward to seeing you in March. Well, we're over here at the Piscataway Community Center, and we're fortunate enough to be here for the first official Piscataway High School home game. Due to the fact that the Middlesex County Wrestling Tournament's taking place in a home venue, the next best thing is to have a home high school basketball game here at the Piscataway Community Center. So we're playing Trenton today, so I'm very excited that the high school team is playing over there. my grand dog. When we go to the grocery store, you know, residents will come up to you and say, hey, Mayor, I got a problem here or there, or you may be out shopping or over at the library or eating pizza with your kids and stuff like that, because people have a concern and they have a tendency to speak more frankly to you when you're in person there. They don't necessarily gonna type an email or pick up the phone and call, but they'll see you in person. They'll come up, hey, I don't really wanna bother you, but I have an issue here and there. And as an elected official, you have to be prepared to try to address that. So coming in, if you ever wanna run for office, that does happen. But that also gives you satisfaction that you're able to help people out. Because the whole idea of being involved at the elected level, you're there to help your community. And so the day that you don't feel like you're bored or something, that's the time when you should just turn the reins over to somebody else to do that. Because you really have to be 100% on your game at all times. And I want to also thank Congressman Pallone for all the hard work that he does for New Jersey down in Washington. I don't know if you know it or not, he's a very influential figure down there by his stature where he sits on the Energy Commerce Committee. And I think 70% of all legislation? Probably
more like 60.
All right, well, I'm saying 70. So you could say 60, I'll say 70. But it derives that affects residents around the country. Comes out of the committee that he sits on. So, which is very important, whether it's telecommunications, health, safety, like the FDA, you name it, just probably everything that affects your lives. He has a hand in that. And also some of the most landmark legislation that has been passed in the last 10 plus years has your name attached to it when the president signs the bill. With that, I will see you, and thanks for being on the February TV show this month. All right, everybody take it easy. All right. Thanks, Tyler. Thanks, okay. It's late morning, February 2nd on 2024, and we're here with Captain and Duncan, my two labs, and we're out to see what kind of forecast Piscataway Pete has, whether we're going to have 6 more weeks of winter or an early spring. My bet is it's going to be an early spring because my daffodil shoots are starting to come up at my house. But come on, boys, let's go on over. Let's go see if the Piscataway Pete left us a note. Because I know a lot of people are very excited. They're hoping that spring is going to come early. We'd all love to see spring come early. All right, let's go see what we can find here. Come on, let's go wake him up. Come on, let's go see what he's got here. All right, what? Oh boy, he must knew you were coming. He left you a biscuit there. Here, there's a biscuit and a note here. So let's see what it is. All right. Oh, looks like 2 notes. Walk for your health, Saturday, May 4th. This is sponsored by our County Commissioner, Chanel Scott McCollum, out there, and we encourage everybody to come up on Green Acres and walk for your health. That's always a good thing here in Piscataway Township. And then also, this is a new one here, Restaurant Week, May 13th through May 19th, to support the local restaurants here in Piscataway Township. So please keep an eye out for more details. Get ready to eat a lot of great food here in Piscataway, and you can walk it off here on Green Acres when you're finished eating it. So please take a look at Green Acres. Keep an eye on our website and our Facebook pages for both these events coming up, and we hope everybody has a beautiful spring coming up.